Hi YouTubers, this is another video from your friendly neighborhood reviewer Evelyn. Today we're going to be reviewing episode 2 of season 3 of Superman and Lois. We got left off with the idea of Lois could have been pregnant. I've already seen episode 2 and you have no idea how wrong I was and the shock of finding out that. So at the beginning of episode 2 we see Lois going back for further tests and we see that something's been instructed for her chest area, which I didn't really put that much attention to. Just the rest of the episode, Lois has been spacing out, and even Clark is recognizing that, but I don't understand how Clark didn't use his X-ray vision, but then again, privacy issues. This episode really hits home that despite how powerful Superman can be, sometimes human natural disasters or human diseases he may not have the power to heal. So we have for the scenes that she's going about her business waiting for the results of the test. She gets a phone call while she's in the newspaper thing with Clark and the other woman, and she receives the results from this test. We don't know what it is. So within the episode, it's more of a follow-up of what happened with this member from the Intergang called Henry Miller, for the Atom Smash, I can't remember, some sort of atom name, and whether Bruno Mannheim was behind this, which is obviously that's the case. So the big point from this episode, both Lois and Clark are investigating the judge that released Henry Miller from the prison to see where she got the pressure from, because they suppose Henry Miller is a bad guy, a criminal, but however he was just a normal human and he ended up getting these powers out of nowhere. And the other part of the episode we get exploration with Jonathan and Jordan Kent and the rest of the teenagers, Natalie and Sarah. Due to the mold in the school, all the students have had the day off, or a day off per se, so all of these teenagers decide to go to a party. So Sarah and Natalie, we see they get kind of close through the episode, where Sarah knows everything as well as Lana and starts asking Natalie whether she had any crushes in the other world that she was in, and Natalie says obviously not, that's not the fact. And Sarah convinces Natalie to go to this party in Metropolis, in which they do, and also Jordan and Jonathan, they go to the same party because it was in connection with Jonathan's ex-girlfriend, which we saw in season 2. I don't know if it's the same actress, but hey. The other part of the scene, we can see that Clark is trying to figure out what is wrong with his wife. His wife is clearly different. When you're together with someone as a married couple, depending how deep the connection is, they realize when something is off, in which Clark is trying to find out. And this episode highlights how the character of Clark is, forever compassionate. He even tells Lois, I know there's something going on, but when you're ready, I'm here, we're a team, that sort of thing. And the other part of the episode we see with John Henry Irons dealing with his teenage daughter in a different world, him trying to find his place, because both Natalie and John, they're accepted that this version of Superman is not the same one as theirs. So it's kind of like seeing how does the character John figure out this whole configuration. And on the top of that, we see that Lana is getting a little bit closer to John, because in the episode, Lana receives a phone call from the previous mayor, and she hears the previous mayor being murdered by this mysterious figure with this weird mask. I think the character is called onomatopoeia, which you know how it is, the words that describe a sound sort of thing. And so John is helping Lana to investigate what the hell happened, and when they go to the ex-mayor's office and find a USB stick, before they can download some things, the villain onomatopoeia appears and uses some sort of sound wave, aka the onomatopoeia sound, ends up decapitating both of them. I don't remember if the villain when he got the USB stick, but that causes a thing where John goes and installs a security system in Lana's place, and they also have a meal together. So there's also the part of Lana's ex-husband that she decided to get rid of. Can't remember the ex-husband's name. You can see how incoincidental that character is. He just is basically, Lana's ex-husband is one of those guys that they reached their peak in high school, where he could have been like, a high school jock, and they never thought like, what else can I do? So we have Lana's ex-husband, his storyline that he wants to get back together with his wife, does some other shady things on the side. So Clark and Lois interviewed the judge that went and released Henry Miller, but the judge is very closed off. And before Lois and Clark can interview the judge more, these fixers arrive, these mysterious men, to threaten them essentially. Of course, Clark is playing off that he's weak and fragile when these guys try to manhandle him, and Lois, when they try to manhandle her, she goes and says, get off me, don't touch me, that sort of thing. So they end up going out from the judge's place with no answers, and Clark goes off to buy some smoothies for Lois. In this arc incarnation of Clark Kent, Kyle, Superman, they made him so goddamn compassionate to a fault. I guess he has that program into his mind, because imagine Superman losing control, like billions of lives could be lost in this matter. And this could be an important point what I'm going to describe next. So as Clark and Lois is waiting, they see the fixers, which we can assume from Bruno Mannheim, go off, and Lois tells Clark, quickly, chase them, because of course he's Superman, which he does. So we see the fixers return to Bruno Mannheim's house, mansion, whatever you want to call it, and they see that Superman is outside in the vicinity since he has cameras, and Bruno Mannheim and Superman have a conversation in which ultimately Bruno Mannheim's kind of philosophy of thinking that he has to help his neighborhood in terms of where they are. And so we have that kind of, let's say, line between class divisions. I don't want to include race into this, but you interpret it how you will. Yeah, to any viewers, put your comments down below. What's the greater plot between Bruno Mannheim's objectives and Superman's? Because Bruno Mannheim does accuse Superman of not helping his area of the neighborhood, always caring about other people. So you let me know your interpretations of what you thought about that conversation. Before anything else could be said, Superman hears Lois is talking to the judge, in which we find out that the judge is going to commit suicide by jumping off from the building of her office, but Lois climbs up the stairs again and tells her to stop. This bit's a little bit iffy that the police allowed Lois Lane to be interviewing a potential jumper. I don't know the specifics about that, whether maybe it's due to Lois's connections with her dad, who's a general. So while Lois is trying to convince the woman not to, end her life, she tries to relate to the jumper, but saying, I understand, how uncontrollable things were. The title of this episode, Uncontrollable Forces, but it's not worth your life to do that. And Lois tells the woman, I understand how you're feeling, because at the moment when she's about to confess, Superman, aka Clark, comes flying by, and then Lois gathers up the courage to admit that she just recently got found out that she was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer. And in that moment, it was to me, I was shocked. I was like, whoa, this is like completely left field, but more relatable. And to see the character and the figure of Superman. Now, this is credit to Tyler Hoechlin's acting, as well Betsy Bullock's acting, in which Superman, his face crumples. We don't see Superman here, we see the devastated husband to hear that his wife is being diagnosed with such a rare type of cancer. Lois manages to convince the woman not to jump. She climbs down and she tells the officers to take her and she'll be behind there. And then we get the scene in which Clark goes down and he ends up hugging his wife, and we can see that complete devastation between the both of them. Sideswipe the characters of the teenagers. Jordan learns how to be more friends with his ex-girlfriend. He ends up trying to move forward, but without them having sort of an altercation with the other high schoolers or college students there. So they have that little scene, that teenage fun, as they say. But for me, the main point of this episode was how such human issues hitting Superman, and then your mind starts thinking, Superman has his fortress of solitude, he has the alien technology. I wonder how they're going to explain maybe Clark not using the resources he may have, or I won't be surprised if they'll say that cancer, even in different worlds, the cure hasn't been found out. So the other pivotal scene, we get a sit-down scene between Clark and Lois in their house, and Lois starts explaining that she didn't have an obvious lump on her breast, but they took the symptoms, and Dr. Irons, John Henry Irons' sister from Lois's world, not his, said due to Lois not having family history of her mother, when it accelerated the results. Now, let me tell you from experience, maybe if you have good connections in the private hospital, but in the UK it takes quite a while for you to get results back of that magnitude. And Lois carries on to explain to Clark that she got diagnosed with inflammatory cancer, and she apologizes to Clark for not telling him earlier. But Clark, the ever compassionate husband he is, says, don't worry, you don't need to apologize. And Lois, the most vulnerable that we've seen Lois, so saying to Clark that she didn't want to scare him, and she didn't want Clark to see her as, sick, in which Clark says, you know, I can never see you in that way. You're the strongest person that I know. And Clark says point blank, oh, we're gonna do this together as a team, and no more going to any doctor's visit by yourself. I don't know how that will work out for the rest of the episodes, because he is Superman. If he hears a building being caught on fire with, let's say, people screaming for help across the Antarctic or China or different countries will be there. So we see the real moral and like life implications of being a superhero and dealing with his family. We can mirror that with being a policeman or a doctor and having a family. So we can have those similar metaphors. And the biggest thing at the end was when finally all the teenagers returned back, and Lana was talking with John that she'd been so busy being married she didn't realize her own daughter had lied to her about the so-called like sleepover instead of going to a party. And of course Jonathan and Jordan doing the same thing. But when Jordan and Jonathan return back into the house, they see both their mom and dad sitting really seriously on the table, and they realize something is wrong. Before they could say anything, Clark says, before we say anything, I'll let you know that we'll get through this as a family. And then we get that really heart-wrenching scene where Lois is telling her two sons that she's been diagnosed with cancer and all the ramifications, and we see that vulnerability in Lois. And the bit that always chokes me up is, despite how teenage behaviors both boys have, the first instinct was to go and stand up and hug their mother. And we can see the complete devastation in Clark's face, the pain in his face, knowing what's going to be the next steps. So I really want to see episode 3 now, because there's the other part of Lois's father, General Lane, and maybe Lois's sister Lucy, Lois's sister Lucy, and how I bet you General Lane and Clark are going to clash heads on how to best help Lois with her treatment. Anyway, this is the end of the episode. I tried to really pinpoint the most important things. Put your comments down below if the conversation between Bruno Mannheim and Superman was the metaphor that they're trying to put around with underprivileged areas or ethnic minorities. Leave your interpretations, and did the whole cancer reveal from Lois, did it shock you? So this is the end. As I leave you, always stay safe, and to any new viewers, really appreciate if you can hit the subscribe button, leave your comments down below, and as I leave you always,